It's almost 6 months since Sudan's military seized power, and the opposition remains vocal. On Wednesday, protesters in the capital Khartoum and several other cities once again took to the streets to voice their anger at the military and demand they hand over power to a civilian government.
We came out to send a message to the military who are in power around the country that we want a pure civilian government. The army should return to the barracks. No militia can rule a country, and I think that is a very clear message.
Protesters are also commemorating the 3rd anniversary of a sit-in in front of the army headquarters. That sit-in led the military to depose longtime President Omar al-Bashir after months of protests and sign a power-sharing agreement with the protest movement, an agreement that was dissolved when the army took over last October.
We made a huge achievement in 2019 and ended a regime stronger than the current one. They say the revolution was stolen, but it wasn't. The army was in partnership with us and they betrayed us, and this is a fresh revolution with no partnership with the military. So now we want a civilian government without the military. We can't live under a military rule.
Security forces used tear gas and live ammunition to disperse protesters. In the past 6 months, more than 90 protesters have been killed and hundreds injured as security forces use what rights groups and the UN describe as excessive and brutal force against unarmed demonstrators. Last year's military takeover has created a political crisis. There hasn't been a prime minister for 3 months, and the caretaker government is still running the day-to-day affairs of the country. The uncertainty, along with donor countries halting financial aid to Sudan following the takeover, has created an economic crisis. But the army says even with protests against its rule, it won't hand over power except to an elected government. A joint effort by the United Nations, African Union, and the Regional Intergovernmental Authority on Development, or IGAD, to facilitate talks between the various political actors in Sudan was launched in January. But many protesters have rejected the process.
This revolution will succeed whether that happens today or tomorrow or next year or the coming generation. In 2019, we demand the end of the regime. We're demanding that same thing now. We don't want partnerships or negotiations or compromise with the military.
Protesters have faced the threat of violence and detention from security forces, but they say until their demands for a civilian government and a return to a democratic transition are met, they won't stop protesting. Hiba, Al Jazeera, Khartoum.